about Goldfish or George Osborne, aren't we? We're going to have to pile back into that Trident story, which was next on my list of subjects, actually, but I wasn't expecting to do 2 hours on Trump. It just got more interesting the longer it went on. The breaking news, if you missed it in the bulletin there, is that Theresa May it has been revealed by Downing Street, was told about last year's test of Trident-armed submarine HMS Vengeance that went a bit wrong. She was told when she came into office. And indeed, as the Times reported this morning, she will face intense pressure to answer charges of a cover-up today after she refused to say whether she knew about a failed test of the Trident nuclear deterrent. Well, she has admitted that she did know even before coming under intense pressure. I'll play you the clip from the Andrew Marr programme yesterday morning just to show you where we're good to go on that already. Okay, this will show you where the story and the controversy has come from. But I just want to issue a caveat before that. I don't know how many of the people insisting that Theresa May come clean, or that this is a profoundly significant development, or that this is evidence that Trident is not quite the reliable weapons system that has previously been argued. I don't know how many of them are qualified to comment, but I do know that Theresa May didn't exactly cover herself in glory yesterday morning.
You'll have seen the story this morning about a Trident misfire that was kept from the House of Commons and kept from the public. When you made that first speech in July in the House of Commons about our Trident nuclear defence, did you know that misfire had occurred?
Well, I have absolute faith in our Trident missiles. When I made that speech in the House of Commons, what we were talking about was whether or not we should renew our Trident, whether or not we should have Trident missiles, an independent nuclear deterrent in the future.
Did you know that it had happened?
I think we should defend our country. I think we should play our role in NATO with an independent nuclear deterrent. Jeremy Corbyn thinks differently. Jeremy Corbyn thinks we shouldn't defend our country.
This is a very serious incident. Did you know about it when you told the House of Commons?
And the issue that we were talking about in the House of Commons was a very serious issue. It was about whether or not we should renew Trident, whether we should look to the future and have a replacement Trident. That's what we were talking about in the House of Commons. That's what the House of Commons voted for. I believe in defending our country. Jeremy Corbyn voted against it. He doesn't want to defend our country with an independent nuclear deterrent.
Prime Minister, did you know?
There are tests that take place all the time regularly for our nuclear deterrents. What we were talking about in that debate that took place was about
I'm not going to get an answer to this.
That's quite interesting, actually. I didn't catch that live. I tend not to immerse myself in politics at the weekend if I can possibly avoid it. And I was in the process of arranging a murder mystery party for 13 10-year-olds at that time yesterday. My God, I've never been so glad for a party to end in my life. The stress and the pressure. I was in character as well for the whole thing, playing a sort of tweedy lawyer. Anyway, I digress. That's really interesting, because that's May's first sort of big stumble, isn't it? Because this is oddly relevant to the conversations we've been having about Donald Trump and trust in politicians. She didn't actually say the opposite of the truth. She didn't actually say, no, I didn't know, which would have been a lie, but she refused to answer the question. And that was missing from our analysis of the Trump con, in that politicians not actually being dishonest, but prevaricating and refusing to answer the question maybe has set the scene for someone to come out and answer the question with a barefaced lie, but somehow butter more parsnips than a politician does when they do what Theresa May just did. That was dodge, dodge, dodge. And everybody listening to that, by the end of that encounter, knew, right, that she had been told. Everybody. Have a listen again with the benefit of that slightly cloddish analysis. Everybody listening to this knew by the end of the interview. That's really bad politics. But the conversation we're probably going to have, although Catherine Ealing has already rung in to talk to me about Goldfish, the Goldfish was alive, I should stress. It was that's why it's a criminal case brought by the RSPCA. But the conversation I really want to have is I mean, I've got no qualifications at all in this area, so I've consulted people who do. It's no big deal, this. I don't know what byline was on the story. I suspicion it's probably an old mate of mine who wrote the story, so I don't want to sort of poo-poo the scoop. It's a classic Sunday Times splash. It completely belongs on the front page, but it should probably have gone away by now. It feels a little bit oversold to me. Trident's success rate is incredibly high. It has an incredibly low failure rate, but it's not absolutely infallible. The conversation I want to have with you is about whether or not this is really such a big deal. But this is really interesting. Listen again.
You'll have seen the story this morning about a Trident misfire that was kept from the House of Commons and kept from the public. When you made that first speech in July in the House of Commons about our Trident nuclear defence, did you know that misfire had occurred?
Well, I have absolute faith in our Trident missiles. When I made that speech in the House of Commons, what we were talking about was whether or not we should renew our Trident, whether or not we should have Trident missiles, an independent nuclear deterrent in the future.
Did you know that it had happened?
I think we should defend our country. I think we should play our role in NATO as with an independent nuclear deterrent. Jeremy Corbyn thinks differently. Jeremy Corbyn thinks we shouldn't defend our country.
This is a very serious incident. Did you know about it when you told the House of Commons?
And the issue that we were talking about in the House of Commons was a very serious issue. It was about whether or not we should renew Trident, whether we should look to the future and have a replacement Trident. That's what we were talking about in the House of Commons. That's what the House of Commons voted for. I believe in defending our country. Jeremy Corbyn voted against it. He doesn't want to defend our country with an independent nuclear deterrent.
Prime Minister, did you know?
There are tests that take place all the time regularly for our nuclear deterrents. What we were talking about in that debate that took place was about
I'm not going to get an answer to this.
I never do that myself. I never get close to the Prime Minister, not this one anyway, but I'm not going to get an answer to this question. I'd go Pete Paxman at that point and just keep asking it until the credits roll. But that's journalistic posturing. What intrigues me is whether or not you think she should have told the Commons about this. It's not the first time that Trident has quotes failed. It's not a big deal as I understand it, but I'm happy to trumpet my ignorance on this one. If you do have a better knowledge of these issues, which wouldn't be hard to be honest with you, then by all means come to the front of the queue. The controversy seems to me to be more about whether or not she should have told the House of Commons what she knew before the vote on renewing Trident, and I don't understand why you would. It's an incredibly complicated piece of technology that occasionally fails. It malfunctions. Let's call it a malfunction. It occasionally malfunctions. There are 5 or 6 recorded cases of it malfunctioning, which is a tiny proportion of the number of tests. So, given that was an oddly heated debate in the Commons anyway because of the Labour Party's position on this, their official party policy is to renew Trident, but Mr Corbyn's personal view has always been that we shouldn't. I think that's how they ended up suggesting at one point that we keep the submarines but get rid of the missiles, get rid of the nuclear missiles so that we wouldn't affect the employment levels of the people responsible for building and crewing the submarines. But I don't quite see why say, look, here's some complicated technology that occasionally malfunctions. If you'd said that in the House of Commons, then I suspect that some slightly dopey MPs might have changed their vote because they'd have thought it rendered Trident less comprehensive than it currently is. We've still got George Osborne and the Goldfish Eater in our back pocket, but I'd love to know what you think about this. And again, you remember the last caller before the news talking about how tribal everything has become and how it's political debate is rendered ridiculous by the notion that you have to pick a side and then everything your side does you agree with and everything the other side does you disagree with. He's absolutely right, but I like to think of this programme as making something of a stand against that lazy binary world view, because I don't think Theresa May is in anything like the hot water that some people are describing over this. In fact, I think she probably has done everything right except that interview, which would have been on the hoof, and there's no way they'd have signed her up to do Andrew Marr if they'd known that the Sunday Times were going to be splashing with that story. What should she have done in the interview? She should probably have said in public whatever conversation happened in private, which would be something along the lines of, yes, I did know, Andrew, just as I am aware of malfunctions in 2011 and 1999 or whatever it is, but of course you have to set them against the context of 97 or 98% of tests coming off successfully. There's not a toaster on the planet that is immune from malfunctioning, and the more complicated the technology, the more vulnerable potentially that technology will be to a malfunction. You remember they couldn't even, the computer software that was responsible for registering for the referendum vote failed, didn't it, at the last minute under the pressure of people piling in. Things go a little bit wrong. The sat-nav on my Volvo went south about 6 months ago. I had to take it back to the garage to have it reprogrammed. And I'm not trivialising this. Obviously, if it had been a nuclear warhead that we'd launched and something had gone wrong and we ended up blowing up the wrong people, it probably would be too late to worry. The thing about nuclear warheads, it doesn't really matter where they land, because once they're up and running, we're all dead. So it was heading towards America, is reported as part of the crisis. It was supposed to be heading towards America. That was the range. So again, you know, maybe I'm swimming too hard against the binary tribalism, but I don't see this as being a very big deal. Complicated technology occasionally fails. One of those failures occurred shortly before an important vote on the future of that complicated technology. Prime Minister's advice, one imagines, was don't go public with this because it's not relevant to the overall efficacy of Trident, but some people might use it as a way to undermine Trident, and that would be bad for the national security. What is the Prime Minister's job? Supposedly safeguarding national security. 12, it's just come out to 12:15. Hit the numbers now on this and you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. How much bother do you think Theresa May is in? I generally don't get much traction with questions that boil down to how big a deal do you think this is, but given that it's broken in the last 10 minutes that she did know about the failed test of the Trident nuclear deterrent, can you do what I'm doing and not use this as a lens through which to confirm your pre-established political views, whether it's party political or your view of Theresa May in person? I would have thought that top secret military information should have stayed top secret. Arguably, it's the job of journalists to get it out there. It's not necessarily the job of a prime minister to compromise national security by revealing this sort of stuff. On the other hand, if the Sunday Times can find out about it, you can be pretty confident that the Russian and the Chinese already knew. It's 12:15. Downing Street has revealed, I think is probably the correct verb to employ here, that Prime Minister Theresa May was told about last year's test of Trident-armed submarine HMS Vengeance and the malfunction in the weapon system when she came into office, which means she knew when the House of Commons debated Trident, and the argument is she should have told the House of Commons, to which my simple response is why? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. If it was foolproof, you wouldn't have tests. That's why you have tests. See if things go wrong so you can fix them before you're actually using it for real. Well, what is a problem here, as Joe points out, this is important, James, as May and other politicians appearing to be dishonest. Not dishonest, but evasive, I think, Joe, don't you? It plays into this climate of conventional politics being corrupt that your previous topic addressed. Hence we have Trump and his lapdog Farage. Of course, the fact that they don't answer a question makes them look dodgy, and then someone answers the question with a lie looks better. That's really interesting. I hadn't seen any parallels between Trump and Trident. But when you listen to May evading and prevaricating, you kind of see the appeal of a politician who goes, yeah, the moon is made of cheese, God damn it. What's the moon made of, Mrs. May? Well, at this point in proceedings, it's very important, obviously, to take samples from the surface of the moon and to expose them to the most rigorous of chemical analysis. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn is a complete plonker. That was essentially the thrust of her answer to the question about whether or not the moon is made of cheese. Donald Trump comes along and goes, hell yeah, the moon is made of cheese. It's the best cheese. I got the best cheese. It's cheese. And it is actually quite refreshing to people who, and I'm going to say this in the most charitable way imaginable, and I mean every syllable of it, to people who are too busy to be that immersed in politics. May looks like a dodgy geezer, or geezerette. Trump looks like the real deal, because, hey, at least he's answering the question. Yeah, but it's a lie. It doesn't matter. I'm not engaged for long enough to register that it's a lie. He got asked a question and he answered it. They usually just run around their houses. But how big a deal was it? John's in Putney. John, what do you reckon?
Well, I mean, the real central point of this is not necessarily the reliability of the missile. I mean, all of them exhibit faults and go wrong.
Yes.
It's the timing in relation to the main gate debate in Parliament, which is the crucial committal of the country to embarking on a new set of successor-class submarines, which we can't really afford. Let's be practical about this.
But if it, I mean, to me, what you've just said is a little contradictory, because if it happens all the time, then the timing doesn't matter.
Well, the timing was crucial because it would have thrown doubt at the time of the debate on the reliability of a system, which is, its big underlying ethos is that it's undetectable. Now, the minute you fire one and it goes wrong, you've given away the position of the submarine. Everybody in the game can track it. They know where it is. So it's. But
I just, sorry to harp on, but to remind you of your original point, everybody who needs to know, or everybody in the know, knows this already. So the only influence it would have had over the vote would have been to influence the ignorant, arguably, or the less informed, they'd have thought, that's a bit dodgy. I'm going to... No? Does that make sense?
No, well, not quite. What they were seeking to do was to sway the country to support something which, let's face it, going forward 10, 20 years, which will be the sort of midlife of the next successor program, will be hopelessly unable to remain undetected, thereby destroying its ethos. Britain can only afford 4 submarines in order...
No, I'm sorry to labour this, but it is not foolproof. Everybody knows that. So the timing is not actually relevant except for political reasons rather than security reasons.
Oh, so, yes, no, absolutely.
Right.
In political terms, yes. In order to get a debate through the House of Commons with as little fuss as possible. And also to counter...
Which is probably in the interests of national security.
Well, not necessarily.
But in her view it is, and that is what we're paying her to do.
At the time, they would... The government produced a rather bizarre report in 2013 called the Trident Alternatives Review. Now, the more you look at it closely, and I don't know if you have...
No, I haven't. And I think you do know that, actually. You're being facetious.
Yeah. No. You're a very well-read guy.
Thank you.
Sure,
You're very kind. I haven't got round to that yet.
But funnily enough, it was a document that kind of slipped through unnoticed. And when you look at it, you think, you kind of turn over the pages and you look underneath and you think, God, there must be more in it than this. And there wasn't. And it was a shabby kind of document that essentially put forward the status quo and the approved version going forward as being the ultimate solution, that anything else would cost ferocious amounts of money or be absolutely useless in a whole variety of ways. So it was really reverse engineered shamelessly rather than in a sophisticated way, which you'd rather expect. So the country was committed to this long expenditure going forward to a system that by the time it's, even barely off the blocks in terms of the first submarines, will probably be detectable by most countries, let alone the big powers, we tend to think of, thereby countering its effectiveness.
Except that it's still... I haven't read the document you've read, but it is still the most reliable ballistic missile system in service anywhere in the world, isn't it, in terms of how often these malfunctions occur?
Oh yes, I mean,
Well, then I'm happy to keep it. And I'd only confuse the issue by putting the information out there.
Yeah, I think the thing is that there are even doubts over the missiles for a whole host of reasons.
Yes.
Given the kind of targets you're likely to encounter in the future. They're essentially built and designed for a Cold War scenario where you're targeting data well in advance.
Sure, and I'm standing by my schoolboyish observation that if it hits the wrong target, it doesn't really matter, because if there are nuclear missiles being deliberately launched into the stratosphere, then we're all doomed.
You're in a bit of a mess already. Absolutely.
Where do you stand on goldfish?
Well, I mean, I like fish.
Should a bloke who ate a live one be sent to jail?
Yes, because I think eating anything live is a whole different thing from something that's been, we hope,
oysters,
mainly killed or killed. I have to confess, I do eat a lot of mussels.
Well, you cook them alive.
Ideological exactly.
So it's all right to boil a mussel to death and to stew it in its own juices, but swallowing a live goldfish is an imprisonable offence. You snowflake hypocrite.
You've got me there. You've got me there.
Yeah, there you go. It's because I read so many books.
Yeah.
It's 27 minutes after 12. John, thank you. I reserve the right to throw the goldfish into the conversation about the ballistic missiles. 0345 6060 is the number that you need. Kind of, it's funny, isn't it? You sort of give yourself a little pat on the back for resisting the tribalistic. This is awful. Theresa May is awful. Then you get accused by some of covering up under government instructions. Now, apparently, I'm covering up. I'm going to have to spend less time looking at the box of trolls, aren't I? It's just, I mean, hilarious though it is, you kind of find yourself essentially, you really are spending too long contemplating the opinions of people who believe the moon is made of cheese. Adam is in Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland. Adam, what made you pick up the phone?
James, I watched the interview with on the Andrew Marr show with the PM.
Yes.
And I was just willing just to come off and say, yes, I did know about it. What's wrong with just giving a simple answer these days? Why try and avoid the questions and, avoid giving answers. Just give the honest answer.
I knew about it. Okay, why didn't you tell the House of Commons, Prime Minister?
Because what about the secret? Why does everybody need to know about it? For a start, why do we? If they know about it, the enemy's going to know about it, aren't they? We have a secret. We have the secrets act, do we not?
Official. It's official.
It's official. Yeah, it's official. Yeah, and as soon as it comes out, we're letting the enemies know that we've got a problem with major deterrent of nuclear fallout. So why would you do that in the first place? Come on. But the thing about Theresa May was she just. This is why I think. It just could be nipped in the bud by giving simple answers.
It could and it couldn't. I mean, this is where PhD students of the future are going to obsess about journalism over the last 5 to 10 years, because it's journalists that create the atmosphere in which people like Theresa May are frightened to give straight answers, and journalism hasn't yet caught up with the politicians or the sort of public figures who've realised that to tell a lie with enormous confidence allows you to kind of duck around this atmosphere where anything you do, the newspapers are going to be looking for an angle that damns you. So that's why she didn't put it out there straight, because she'd have got crucified in some corners, but she got crucified anyway. So the wisdom of what you're saying, you'd have thought was irresistible. I haven't got time to ask you about goldfishes. It's 29 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I'll tell you what I will take side orders of. I've got some calls coming in on the Trident issue, but unless you can explain to me why it's a really big deal, then I'm tempted to throw a couple of other things into the mix, including this deal that George Osborne has got. So straight up, again, trying to leave tribal loyalties at the door. If you're paying a former Chancellor, and not by most accounts a very good one, £200,000 a year for one day's work at a fund manager, what do they get for their money? You can be as sophisticated or as simplistic as you like on that, but hit the numbers now and you will get through. Don't stop looking into the box of trolls so much if it gives you so much joy when I do. But we'd probably steer clear of them today, because I'm not being paid by Downing Street to defend Theresa May on this one. This is how I would have handled it, okay? Should we listen to the interview again? I like this sort of, because this to me increasingly looks like a crisis of political handling rather than a crisis of national security. Here is briefly Theresa May refusing to answer a question, okay?
You'll have seen the story this morning about a Trident misfire that was kept from the House of Commons and kept from the public. When you made that first speech in July in the House of Commons about our Trident nuclear defence, did you know that misfire had occurred?
Well, I have absolute faith in our Trident missiles. When I made that speech in the House of Commons...
Yada, 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 yada. And so it goes on, and she doesn't answer the question, and Andrew Marr says at the end, well, I'm obviously not going to get an answer to this question. So do you want cheese in your sandwiches? Well, obviously I'm a huge fan of sandwiches, and I'm also rather fond of cheese, but we mustn't overlook the appeals of ham and tomatoes. And when you say, do I want cheese in my sandwich, are you including pickle in that proposal, or would it be a pickle-free sandwich? And of course, Jeremy Corbyn eats children. That's essentially how it worked. Here's what she should have done, right? Bob's in Edinburgh. Bob, do you want to be Andrew Marr for a minute?
Go on, yeah.
Go on, ask me the question.
So, did you know about this in advance of the speech you gave in the House of Commons?
I did, yes, Bob.
Okay, then.
That would be media training 101. Ask me again, and I'll show you what she should have done.
Did you know about this in advance of the speech in the House of Commons?
I did, yes. Do you know how many Trident 2 tests there have been since the late 1980s, Mr. Marr?
I don't.
No. And do you know how many failures there have been during that period?
I don't.
Oh, and do you know what the percentage failure rate is, Mr. Marr?
No.
Oh, well, let me tell you, there have been 158 Trident 2 tests since the late 1980s, and that's including last summer's, in which there have been 6 failures, 5 of which predate 1990. So you'll see that the process of testing and addressing malfunctions is working brilliantly, because the overall failure rate is approximately 3.8%. Can I help you with anything else, Mr. Marr?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's a very good point with regards to that, but I think the challenge for her, though, surely, is she went into the House of Commons without being open and honest about any of the deficiencies of the system, which to some degree...
The Trident system.
Yeah, the Trident system.
Yeah.
Because actually one of the main arguments that was being postured by the other side was that in today's world, with today's threats of terrorists and people hiding in plain sight, an indiscriminate weapon of mass destruction is actually probably not the best weapon to be using. And if you've got a weapon of mass destruction that also has the capacity to fail, then it only serves to improve the argument that actually maybe we should be looking for something a bit more precision in nature.
Well, possibly, but there is no more reliable ballistic missile system in service at the moment. There is no failure rate lower than 3.8%. The debate was not about... Go on.
The argument is a ballistic missile system actually isn't in and of itself the thing that we should be using.
But that's not what the debate... I don't know that is what this debate is about, is it?
I think by not disclosing any of the challenges that they have with the system, then it...
But I just Googled it and found out what the failure rate is.
Sure, but was that made public in advance?
I just Googled it.
No, I mean in advance.
Yeah. It's ancient. You need to follow a guy called Shashank Joshi on Twitter as well. He's a fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, and he really knows his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see what I mean? I would, I think, have been close to your position on this if I wasn't aware of the facts.
Sure.
And the facts are, it's got a 3.8% failure rate, and that's one example of a malfunction. Move on. If you want to have a debate about whether or not we should have nuclear weapons, that's a different debate for a different day. Whether or not we should renew Trident is a debate about whether or not it's a decent bit of kit for the money that we pay, and it's pretty much the best there is.
Sure.
I think. What about goldfish? Should a man be sent to jail for swallowing a live goldfish?
People eat live things all the time. I think it's a very odd thing to do.
It is a very odd case as well. Very odd case to bring. It was part of the Neck Nominate challenge. You remember that over the course of last summer, I think it was. And what happened was, after a night of drinking, two lads went into the office above the Crazy Horse bar in Paynton in Devon, and one of them swallowed a goldfish for a dare. They were both found guilty, him and his mate, of causing unnecessary suffering to the fish, but they were cleared of failing in their duty to protect it. Oh, man. I'm going to laugh at this, and someone's going to tweet me saying, I can't believe you're laughing about that poor goldfish. Well, jog on. Seriously, if you can't laugh about someone swallowing a goldfish but being acquitted of failure to protect it, then what can you laugh at? They denied the charges, insisting they believed the fish was dead. But the video got them banged to rights. I really did. I mean, clearly it was alive. It was crystal clear, according to the prosecutor for the RSPCA. There's several questions here. Should the RSPCA be spending your money or your dead great-grandmother's money on prosecuting a fella for swallowing a live goldfish after a night of drinking? Second question would be, I mean, they've been warned they could be jailed when they're sentenced on February the 3rd. The judge is just putting the frighteners on them, right? There's no way you're going to be sent. What are you in for? Armed robbery. What are you in for? Murder. What are you in for? Swallowed a live goldfish. What are you... hang on a minute. You're in for what? Back to Trident with a side order of goldfish, and also I'm very keen for you to tell me what you think you get when you pay George Osborne 200 grand a year for 1 day's work at your fund manager. What do you get for your money? 0345 606 0973. Nick's in Putney. Trident, goldfish, or George Osborne, Nick?
Well, after the last conversation, I feel a little bit redundant, so I was starting to Google alt goldfish.
Yes, that's the spirit.
Find anything yet. But I think Theresa May made it shows two lacks of judgment, and that's why it's important. One, as you rightly just said, she should have just admitted it at the time when Andrew Marr first time said, "Did it go
Why do you think she didn't? Why do you think she didn't? Why do you think she didn't?
Maybe her advisors, maybe somebody else didn't Google it first beforehand. Maybe so she didn't have the full facts. Maybe she thought, I can spin this to get a cheap shot at Jeremy Corbyn. But denying it 3 times, we know that doesn't work. And we're having this conversation, which seems totally redundant. If she had just killed it then and there, end of.
She's getting bad advice then. She's getting very bad advice, because they must have known the question was going to come up. You turn up at the studio, it's on the front page of the Sunday Times. What's the tactic going to be? Either she was given dodgy advice or she was given good advice and she ignored it.
Well, I'd also like my Prime Ministers to listen to advice, but also have their own opinion. And surely anybody would think, particularly with everything that's going on in the States and all the rest of it, just kill it then and there. Kill the story, finish it. But although I'm actually these days anti-media, once upon a time I was, but I'm anti these days, I actually thought she missed a trick.
Go on.
She could have actually mentioned this at the time of the original debate about upgrading Trident. You could have gone and said, it's actually a pretty good system. However, we do actually have the occasional
malfunction, therefore we need more money.
and therefore it does need. I mean, the whole thing was it's running out, it's getting too old, it needs to be updated. You know, in the same way as you go and say, well, cars, you know, just starting now, I'm starting to get a red light on its dashboard. I need to get it, have an MOT, or maybe I need to get a new car. She could have spun it that way.
Indeed, she could. Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, I mean, yeah, she dropped a ball on all sorts of levels. Nick, thank you very much indeed. 12:42 is the time. All right, I'll give you one, okay? Just one, because I don't want to spoil you. A quick look in the box of trolls. Here's a good one. Jem O'Brien, that's me, talking about a guy in court for eating goldfish. Not a word about Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, jailed in Iran. I wonder why. I wonder why as well. It's weird, isn't it? Remember that time our husband was here in the studio telling us about the plight of Nazanin and the appalling incarceration that she's enduring over in Iran. But old Jem O'Brien, he must be deliberately ignoring it because he's sucking up to the Muslims. That's today's glimpse into the box of trolls. Back to George Osborne, or indeed the goldfish swallower, or Trident. Take your pick. John's in Perth. John, what have you got?
James, I'm just wondering whether it's not what BlackRock are going to be getting. It's maybe perhaps what they've got.
This is payback time.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if anybody's done any decent investigation into the RBS shares and who bought them and which investors made money out of them. But I'm hedge a bet myself that perhaps BlackRock did very well out of that.
But then they've got the money. They don't need to give him a job. It's the world's biggest fund manager, so it almost certainly made a few quid. Go on.
Promises are promises. And I guess if you get the tip off, then you must pay back at some point.
Nah, I mean, they won't have been if you do this, we'll do that, but further down the line. I think one of his key advisors called Rupert, he really is called Rupert, I just can't remember his surname. He works there, so that's the kind of door opening. It's more of a, I mean, you describe a quid pro quo, but they will be expecting something in return for their money moving forward. You don't hand over 200 grand a year because of the view in the rear view mirror, do you? Or do you?
Well, I guess they're getting huge publicity for it anyway. I mean, £200,000 a week. I don't know how many columns.
A year. He's not a footballer.
Oh, quite actually.
I don't know. What about the goldfish?
Goldfish had many. Have
you ever swallowed one alive?
Live or fried, always good.
It's coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What do they get for the money? I genuinely don't know. You put his name on the letterhead. I can see how in the case of some politicians, off the top of my head, it's hard to think of any, that it might enhance your reputation. They all get directorships, don't they? All of them. Labour, Conservative, they all come out and get directorships. It's not unique for George Osborne to do it. There's a very good piece in the Times by Sky News' business presenter Ian King, in which he points out that a lot of the people, hundreds of thousands of Britons, were stopped from saving as much as they would like into their pensions by George Osborne, and now he's going to earn lucrative fees from an asset management firm. If they have any retirement savings with BlackRock, the very people stiffed by Mr. Osborne will now be contributing to his salary. So again, it adds to the confusion about what they're going to get for him. He was quoted in the press release as saying, BlackRock wants better outcomes for pensioners and savers, and I want to help them deliver that. 12:45 is the time. To be honest with you, the more I look at this story, the more I actually get cross about it. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that a bloke has been prosecuted for eating a live goldfish. You think about how many... Do they do it on I'm a Celebrity? Is anything ever alive when they stuff? It probably isn't, is it? For precisely the same reason. But lobsters are thrown into boiling water. I mean, the squealing that you hear isn't actually a lobster squealing. It's the air emerging from the pockets in through tiny holes. Mussels you cook live. I mean, there's a lot of things that you cook live. What's the difference between cooking something live and swallowing something live? What would you rather? Would you rather be boiled alive or swallowed? I don't understand why this has come to court. I genuinely don't. And oddly, it was supposed to be a little bit of light relief, but it's annoying, isn't it? Unless, of course, you are of the view that goldfish need protecting. Do you know, I've just remembered something. Last time I bought fish from a pet shop, not from a fishmonger's, they make you sign something, because is it Iranian New Year where they swallow a goldfish? I think it is. That's great now. All the Islamophobes are going to come down on the side of the RSPCA and call. There's certainly, sort of in that part of the world, on New Year's Eve, you have a fish in your glass at dinner. I could have dreamt this and just gone completely mad, offended an entire nation. But I asked in the pet shop, it was in Brentford, I grant you, it wasn't in the Bosphorus, but I asked in the pet shop, Why do you need to track me? And they were checking that I wasn't going to buy loads of fish and serve them up on New Year's Eve. I think I couldn't have imagined that, could I? Someone will ring in and set me straight. 0345 606 0973 and Trident. And what do you get when you pay £200,000 a year to George Osborne? Contacts apparently. Linda is in East Ham. Goldfish, George Osborne or Trident, Linda?
Goldfish.
Carry on.
I'm surprised at you, James.
Why?
Would you say it was okay to eat a hamster alive?
I wouldn't be able to.
Well, no, it would be difficult.
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make...
Also, I'd want, if I was going to eat a hamster, I'd want it skinned, and it would only be fair to kill it before I skinned it.
Well, I think you're winding me up now, but two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, I don't agree with lobsters being boiled alive, and therefore I wouldn't eat one.
Oh, well, you're consistent.
Yeah, I mean, it's the principle. It is suffering, and I think as you go through life, you should try to alleviate any suffering wherever it is. It doesn't matter if it's humans, animals, creatures. But
I mean, you can disapprove of it, but would you really prosecute? The fella's been told he might go to prison.
Well, I think it needs to be shown that he's done wrong. Whether he goes to prison or not is another story. I doubt that very much, but maybe a fine. And it should be pointed out to him that it does cause the fish suffering, and he shouldn't be doing that. Everybody should think about what they do that causes suffering, whatever it is.
Okay. I mean, I suppose at least you're consistent, so all of these arguments about lobsters and mussels don't butter any parsnips with you.
I wouldn't eat them because I know what happens to them. I mean, some of the suffering apparently can be avoided if their temperature's brought down before they're thrown.
All right, I'm going to tell you a secret. Okay, I've got some fish.
Yeah.
I'm sick to death of them. I really am. But cleaning out a fish tank sounds like a euphemism. It's one of the most unrewarding, boring jobs in the world. I've got 2 fish tanks at home. I'll look after the one in my daughter's room because she likes it. But the one downstairs, I'm pretty close to calling time on it. Between you and me, Linda, I was hoping they were going to die of natural causes. I've been sort of neglecting them.
Yeah. Well, you need to find a way.
But what can you do? What can you do with unwanted fish? It's not like there's a Battersea Dogs Home for fish.
Well, there's 2 things.
And they keep breeding as well. Have you seen how they breed?
They do, yeah.
They're like rabbits.
But the thing, can I answer?
Yeah.
I mean, there's two options. You can try and find a home from the RSPCA would help you, or if you really don't want them, take them to a vet and have them put down humanely so they don't suffer.
They're about 1.5 centimetres long.
Yeah, well, I don't know why people get animals if they're not committed to looking after them for the rest of their life. They shouldn't get them if they're not going to do that.
What about maggots?
Sorry?
What about maggots? When you stick a maggot on a hook and throw it in the river to catch a fish?
I don't do that.
No, I know you don't, but would you prosecute someone for using a maggot to catch a fish?
I think that they need to think about what they're doing. Do they really need to use a maggot, or can they use something else that's not alive?
Yeah.
And is it really...
It's not what I asked you. I don't want to go Pete Paxman on you, but would you prosecute a fisherman for using a maggot? And because they don't just skewer it on the hook, then they drown it in the water. That's no way to go.
Well, there are problems with fishing. I mean, it is a difficult one. But I still think you have to be aware that you're causing suffering. I doubt very much if they'll get prosecuted for that, but, it's not a human...
There's one rule for the goldfish and another rule for maggots, then?
Unfortunately...
That's maggotist.
That's real life. That is real life, but it doesn't make it right.
No, do you know what, Linda? You've won this call, as it were. I know we haven't been battling with each other, but you're making more sound. I'm looking for cheap gags. You're making some really pertinent points. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. No, I always listen. Always listen. Sometimes I may not give that impression. Now we're going to talk about the Trident missiles with Faber, who is in Toulouse, near Limoges. Faber, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, good morning, James. I always listen to your program.
Oh, merci.
And this Trident problem you have,
yes,
it's not really a problem. I think the missile did exactly what it was commanded to do. I think it is an operator error or a lack of double check on the number entries on the computer. And I think it's as simple as that. There's no way this flight control system in a missile or in a jumbo, they are made by giant American electronic manufacturers. So, for example, if you program a jumbo taking off from Heathrow and the guy put the wrong number on the aircraft head for, instead of JFK, it head to Hong Kong. It doesn't mean that the jumbos are no good. It means the operator made a mistake.
You're probably right. What are your qualifications? I've let you address the nation on this. If you're a fish fryer for a living, I'm going to feel a little bit silly. Do you have any professional insights into this?
Yes, I am a retired avionic engineer. I know all about flight control.
There you go.
Management systems on a big jets.
Where do you stand on goldfish?
And they use, you see, what they use in global navigation.
Yes.
They use latitude and longitude numbers, so that the destination is identified.
I'm glad you were here. I think you've pretty much closed that one down. Absolutely fascinating to see it actually not as the scandal it was presented as, which was a national security issue, but as a political problem in terms of the handling. Faba, thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words also. Well, I say kind words. You say I listen to the programme every day. I take that as a compliment. Razor's in Knightsbridge. Razor, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James.
Hey, Razor.
I wanted to speak to you, and just clearing up the goldfish. Iranian, they don't swallow goldfish on New Year. We appreciate all the humans and all the animals. We use them especially on New Year's Day, as a display, then we release them in pond. Regarding who...
So you do have a goldfish in your glass on New Year's Day, but you don't swallow it. You release it humanely.
No, we release it in the pond. Yes, we don't kill it. We don't harm it. Just for a few hours for New Year's Day, arrival of spring. The other thing is why in ancient days they swallow goldfish. Somebody had a hepatitis. They believe if you swallow goldfish, they will get rid of the yellow bits in your body. So this was the ancient thing, medicine in Iran.
Well, I love flipping out.
Medicine purposes.
I tell you what, Razor, when you got up this morning, I bet you didn't think you'd be ringing a national radio station to explain about people.
I listen to you, James.
Oh, bless you, Razor.
The only radio I listen.
Good man.